Well, hello, Mauricio. I'm just going to say that. Hello, Mauricio. And hello, everyone who's watching in Facebook Live. My name is Diego Mariscal. I
Hay
am.
varios, hay 10. Listo.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Yay!
Hi,
Sorry, can you repeat that?
excuse me.
Oh, no problem.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. Um, all right. So, my name is Diego Mariscal. I'm the founder of Together International. It's an organization that works to support entrepreneurs with disabilities. And it really, I started sort of out of my own frustration. I'll take you back to the beginning of time. No, but I was born in the States by accident. My parents were shopping, who are both from Mexico. They were shopping in the US. And I was born 6 months and a half into my mom's pregnancy. So pretty tiny baby. My mom jokes and says that I've always been really stubborn, even before I was born. And so, oh, we got another person, Victor. Um, Great. And so, growing up with a disability in Mexico is very different than growing up with a disability in the States. There's not as many laws and regulations to protect. So having to self-advocate and having to fight against the system and sort of figure out how to have access to education, transportation, um, and some of the same things that non-disabled people sort of take for granted was something that I grew up seeing. My brother actually doesn't have a disability. My brother and I are 10 months and a half apart. So it was really evident, when he was included in schools or when he was able to attend different places. In contrast, I wasn't because things were not accessible, right? And so that was very apparent. And then also, what was interesting was my parents had the same level of expectations for me and my brother. And what I mean by that is, if he had to make his bed in the morning, I also had to make my bed. If he had to help around the house with cleaning, I also had to help around the house. In some cases, that meant, my mom had to wake up 3 hours before so that she could teach me how to make my bed, or that meant that I had to carry like things, silverware that was plastic, so that if I fall, glass wouldn't break. So they were little accommodations here and there, but the bottom line was the expectation was still the same for me and my brother. And so that was kind of the foundation that helped me build high levels of expectations for myself. And when I was in high school, I recognized that nobody else was talking about disability. Nobody was being educated about disability. So I started a student group that was all about educating students about disability. So we would do things like eating without being able to see, or using public transportation in a wheelchair, or communicating without speaking. And that was a gateway to learning about disability and sort of being exposed to having conversations about disability. By the time I left high school, we were, I believe, in 7 high schools across the country. 80% of it was corporate funded, and to these days still continues to be one of the largest youth-led groups around disability. I don't know how they're doing right now with COVID, but I'm very proud to see how the program has continued even after I left. And then I moved back to the States. I moved to Washington, D.C. for college. And what was interesting was I realized that people started to call me an entrepreneur. I didn't really see myself as an entrepreneur. I just saw myself as somebody that built something because I was frustrated about something else. And so as I was in college, I started to see firsthand how there was a lot of discrimination on the employment space. Um, People with disabilities, are disproportionately unemployed and live in poverty. And I started to experience that for myself too. I would go to job interviews, and it was interesting. I would give people my resume, and somehow they would see me, and then they would see my resume and have this like confused look in their face, as if they were saying like, how can this resume belong to this individual, and kind of very confused. And so early on, I realized that it was easier for me to start side hustles than it was for people to take me seriously in the workplace. And so I started tutoring for a while, and I made some good money there. Then I started an Airbnb hostel service, and I lived with like 7 other people in a 1-bedroom apartment, which was pretty interesting. Then I worked at the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, for a while. So I did a bunch of like sort of off jobs here and there, but always with this sort of entrepreneurial, innovative mindset. And then I realized that other disabled people were also entrepreneurial. And that makes sense. From the moment we wake up, we have to figure out how do you get dressed, how you drive, how you communicate. We have to constantly solve problems. And so that led me to think, well, if we are constantly solving problems and we have this resilience, tenacious creativity that's just innate in us, how can we use those skills in the workforce? And that's where Together International was created, with the idea of how do we reframe disability as a workforce development, reframe disability as an opportunity for entrepreneurship, as an opportunity to be innovative, creative, and to make a difference. And so our program is in some ways similar to Street Entrepreneurs, in that it's trying to say, entrepreneurship is actually achievable for everyone, and especially people that are sort of marginalized communities tend to have those innate qualities that you look for in an entrepreneur, right? Grit, tenacity, creativity. And so our program focuses specifically on disabled entrepreneurs and providing support to those people. And the way we do that is we provide coaching, we provide speaker series, we provide entrepreneurship workshops, capital, and what we call information and referral services, which is anything that's sort of unrelated to entrepreneurship, but it may be housing, it may be transportation. We try to pair people with external services that we've just known from being around in the community. So as I mentioned, there are four core services, which is the workshops, the coaching, the speaker series, the information and referral services, and I think that's core. So it's been really great to see that program evolve. We just finished our first cohort this last month in April, supporting 6 entrepreneurs through an accelerator program, supporting 6 entrepreneurs for the course of 3 months. And now we're looking at how do we scale that and support 100 entrepreneurs going forward. So yeah, that's a bit about who I am. And the work that I'm doing is very much intertwined, which I love. I get to be very authentically myself. But there's a lot more in between that I didn't go in detail, but I'm curious to hear, people's reactions, questions, things like that, and I can go more in depth based on your guys' feedback. And Juliana, feel free to participate also.
Awesome. Diego, I would love to hear a little bit more about um, your thoughts of society and whether it makes room for people with disability, and how can legislators do a better job at ensuring that there is inclusion and equity for people with disabilities.
Yeah, great question. So I think the first thing we have to remember is that disability is the largest minority in the world. 1 billion people have disabilities. In the States, that's about 1 out of 4 people. It's like I said, it's the largest minority in the world. The majority of those disabilities are actually invisible. And a lot of people with disabilities don't want to come out as having a disability because of the stigma around it. Even as a so late to having a disability, not wanting to be associated with having a disability because of my own internalized ableism, basically. And so there's a lot of people that don't disclose that they have a disability. And so back to your questions, what can legislators and what can society as a whole do to be more inclusive of disability? The first thing is to talk about disability, to make it much less of a taboo topic. If you've experienced a temporary disability, we've all experienced some of temporary disability during life if we live long enough. So the first thing, talk about your disability openly, about your disability and your or your temporary disability if you have it. And that's going to encourage other people to come out as disabled and to relate to that experience, especially those who may have invisible disabilities. That's the first point. The second is to remember that because it's the largest minority in the world, there's a huge economic driver around disabilities. Like $150 billion are lost in the US from tax revenue alone because disabled people aren't working, right? And so thinking about what does that mean for my industry? What does that mean for my space? So I would say those two things, being more open and honest about your experiences with disability. And secondly, remembering the economic driver and implications that disability and the disability community bring.
How might an individual start a conversation around their disability?
Yeah, good question. So the first thing I would say is recognizing, I call it the sort of the 6 stages of disability. Similarly to how there's people say, even though might be debatable, right? But people say there's 5 stages of grief, right? There's denial, and I have them written down here actually. Denial, bartering, which is when you try to barter with someone about with the world about not wanting your loved one to be gone. There's sadness, there's anger, and then there's acceptance. Those are the 5 stages of grief. So similarly to that, I would venture to say that, and in talking to other disabled people, it seems to be pretty clear that we all experience some level of grief about our expectations of having disability. And so recognizing that that's a normal part of life. Even, I very much enjoy having disability. I am very much proud of having disability. And yet there's still days where I'm angry and I'm sad about it, right? So recognizing that it's not a straight path. It's sort of an evolutionary process and a kind of a fluid process in that way. So the first thing to answer your question, recognizing where in those stages you fall, right? And recognizing that it's okay and validating that it's okay that you feel a particular way. That's the first thing that I would say. And then the second is reaching out to people that that you admire, that you know have a disability. For example, one of the big game changers in my life was being able to meet this woman that I was talking about earlier offline, Judy Human. She's a very big disability advocate, and I got to meet her at the UN a couple of years ago, and we've became really, really good friends, and I consider her a huge mentor. And what's really great about it is, you know, she's 70, I think she's 70, 71, 72. So she has a lot of experience. And so being able to see someone who's passionate, driven, somebody who's unapologetically themselves, and have open and honest conversations about her own struggles with her disability, my own struggles with disabilities, makes it seem a lot less taboo, right? And so trying to surround yourself with people that that you admire and that at the same time are going through similar experiences than you are.
How can we do better? How can we, as allies to the disability community, be better allies without taking over the disability movement, but really just handing the mic over and standing behind in support?
Yeah, I think that you make a really good point of not leading the disability movement, right? There's a lot of organizations, and I don't really understand. There's a lot of disability organizations that are led by non-disabled people, and lots of like $1 million funded organizations that are led by non-disabled people, and I don't understand it. If there was a women's organizations that was led by men, people would be confused, right? And there would be some questions about the legitimacy of that organization. I really, it's beside me why that is not the case in the disability rights movement. There are so many organizations that are led by disability organizations that are led by non-disabled people, and I don't understand that. And so to answer your question, what can allies do is really highlight that fact and question that fact. When you see a disability organization being led by non-disabled people, asking those tough questions about why is this the case? What procedures and processes you have in place that are making that happen? I remember meeting this going to this very, very large disability organization. They're headquartered in DC, and they have 200 employees just in their headquarters. And learning that out of those 200 employees, only 5 of them were disabled. So that's less than 2% of the people, you know, no, is it less than 2%? Around 2% of people having disabilities. And they didn't even have like leadership, you know, they had other type of roles. And so that was very concerning to me.
Mauricio, do you have a question you would like to ask?
Hi. I'm trying to put my mobile phone in a better place, but I will try to, well, say, first of all, I want to say I am a disability person too. You can see now, I don't know. I have, I'm not from the United States. I live almost all my life in Brazil. But I'm here in Washington, D.C. 1 year ago.
Awesome.
So I am very happy to see you and to see that you are activist like I am. I was in Brazil. I I will be briefly. I studied. I did my in political science, my master's degree and my PhD degree, and I focused all my life to study social policy.
Hmm.
But since 2003, 2004, I started to study all the social factors about disability in Brazil, with,
Great.
with contributing with the Brazilian government with public policy and programs. So I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, we are talking about that problem about misrepresentation, let's say something like that, when institutions and everything about disability people, it's representing, it's living with people that are not disabled, persons with disability. You know, that's a problem. Let's say we have to fight about that. Let's say something about, for example,
Right.
in Brazil, it's very interesting, and I want to know, talking about entrepreneurship and disability. In Brazil, we founded an institution that is talking about the right of to have your own home, your own house, for people with
Right.
problems like autism, like syndrome, Down syndrome, you know. And why not? Why they couldn't have a home like everyone wants? I have my own home. You probably you live in your own home, but
Mhm.
many times, and this is a big industry. It's an economic driver, like you say. You know how many people can construct and sell houses with intelligent uh, software and everything for people. It's so much money in Brazil. We are talking about that. The
Mhm.
possibility to construct apartments, houses for disability people, but for a wheelchair like I am in a wheelchair, I think it's no problem. But I think that it's so innovative to talk about housing uh, for people with cognitive problems, like you know. And do you think when I asking you that this is a good driver here in Washington D.C. or in the United States too, to start talking about housing for disability people?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question quite.
No, I'm trying to say that if you have some experience in the United States that are working with this subject about housing.
Oh, okay. If I have experience, I don't.
Mm.
I know some people that are, so I'm happy to. I'm gonna put my email on the chat, and so feel free to email me. I'm happy to put you in touch with people that are working in that space. I know, I know firsthand, from my own experience that sometimes renting can be a bit of a challenge also because you
Exactly.
can't find accessible units. Um, I just don't know much in the advocacy and housing space.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
But feel free to email me and I'm happy to connect you with the right person.
Okay, and I will connect with you guys because I'm really interested. I am here 1 year in the United States, and I want to, and it was a great opportunity to talk with everyone here because I think so that this network could function. You know, you
Yeah.
could be good, could be good.
How are you managing because you're in the States right now, right?
Yes, since 2019. Yes.
Wow. And so how are you managing COVID?
Well, I live in Bethesda. I don't know if you know the area. I live in Bethesda, and a neighbor that there is not much people. I live in Glen Echo. I don't know if you know,
Mm-hmm.
for the civil hospital,
Yeah.
near to civil hospital. And so I don't have any problem. The wheelchair give you more possibilities to social distancing than other persons, you know.
Right.
It's strange because I am in a wheelchair and everyone is respecting the social distance, you know,
Right.
the 6 feet, everything is it's
Right.
more difficult to do that.
Right.
People open a door of a business, you know, everything. It's okay. Uh, my worries is about what happens if a person with disabilities has COVID-19. If
Mhm.
the hospital has the protocols and everything, because
Yes.
that's a problem, I think so. But I
Right.
don't know about cases. And one thing that in Brazil we were so awareness is that we need information about persons with disability. In Brazil, we don't have so much
Yeah.
information. Who are, what they study, what are the family structure of the person, you know. We don't have so much information. We are so invisible for public policy. That's the problem, you know.
Mhm.
It's so difficult to know, for example, what kind of public policy or financial programs to initiate a business.
Right.
You don't know so much experience. You in general governments they don't ask about that things. You know, I think we have a shortcoming because we stay only in the point that you have a quota, you have to fill 5% of the jobs in in an enterprise. But there is nothing about the quality of the job, the career of the job. If you have a career, you know, you have the same opportunities to ascend in the job like other persons. That's a great question, and you know you will have any problem because you don't have information about that. In Brazil, we have in Brazil there is 25% of persons with disability with some kind of disabilities. We're talking about 60 million persons. It's a
Right.
huge country, 230, and 60 million persons has some bigger than Argentina, for example. Argentina has only 50, 3 times Chile. You know, 60 million of persons have. But I don't want to take so much time. I am very glad to hear you, and I want to hear other persons too.
Of course.
Great
Of
job,
course.
great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bem-vindo. A propósito, eu morei no Brasil e sinto
Hã?
muita saudade. Just had to
Eu,
say that.
eu não sou brasileiro. Eu sou boliviano.
Ah, bueno, pues también,
Eu sou
bienvenido.
de Bolívia, pero vivi, mas eu morei quase 30 anos no Brasil.
Ah,
Yo pensé que eras brasileño.
No, yo soy boliviano.
Ah, ok, ok, ya, ya,
Salí de
ya.
Bolivia muy chico, salí muy joven de Bolivia. No sé si hay alguien en inglés. Sorry for this. I don't know, but yo salí de Bolivia cuando tenía 22, 23 años, hoy tengo 55 y me fui a vivir a
translate.
Brasil. Y
Great.
desde el año pasado estoy aquí en Washington, D.C. Decidí cambiar por motivos familiares, salí de Brasil.
Great.
Awesome. Diego, I have one more question for you. And Paola Tika, please also welcome to ask questions. So entrepreneurship is for obvious reasons huge amongst the disability community. How can um, the innovation economy better support entrepreneurs with disabilities?
Um, Good question. How can I have to think about that? I mean, including more people with disabilities in entrepreneurship ecosystems. You know, one of the um, one of the member companies from our cohort does satellite inspection And he's a really, really smart guy, coming up with some really innovative technologies. He shares the story that um, when they were founding his company, they found supports for Latino um, entrepreneurs. They found supports for minority entrepreneurs, but it was very difficult to find supports for disabled entrepreneurs and programs, loans, accelerators, things like that. That's the reason why we exist. I think to answer your question more fully, um, my my hope and my job at Together International is to create a time where Together is actually not needed, right? Where we go out of business. I think that would be a great indication of success, because it means that people are integrating disability into their already existing program. But that's not happening. And that's the reason why we need to bring people with disabilities together and create this sort of ecosystem around disabled people. But to go back to answering your question, really investing in more entrepreneurs with disabilities. And really what I mean by investing in the truest sense of the word is put money into those initiatives. So many people say, oh yeah, we would love to work with entrepreneurs, or we love to we do care about disability, but then when it's actually time to put some money into it, um, there's no funding available, and so I really think that it's not just enough to say that you care about disability; it's also demonstrating that through actual programming and funding.
Awesome. So we have time for one or two more questions.
Cool.
Okay, hi everyone. Um, I'm Paola. I work for a nonprofit here in Miami-Dade. Okay, what we do is just to help the disabled community to become more independent, especially the youth, 18 to 26. You know, that transition from high school to higher education or just to the community employment. So my question will be, what is that what it needs to be done to actually help more those youth, the transition will be actually a little better, to the community or to employment, which is something that I think that everyone have the same problem. They stuck after they finish high school. There is no way for them to actually find a job.
Yeah. So maybe this is like a shameless plug, right? But I really would say entrepreneurship is a really good way to do it, because um, as an entrepreneur, you have to learn to be self-reliant. You have to learn to be creative. You don't have a boss. You're basically your own boss, right? So you have to learn discipline. You have to learn accounting. You have to learn marketing. I have this shirt that's like, I am, and it says like lawyer, marketer, blah, 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 blah. Then it says CEO, right? Because when when you're starting a company, you have to, you start by doing everything yourself, and then you build a team around you. And so I think there are very strong parallels between learning independent skills and building a company, right? Because you have to learn how to work in a team. You have to learn how to work with limited resources. And so as much as you can integrate, and I'm happy to, chat afterwards if you want to figure out ways in which we could work together. But as much as you can integrate an entrepreneurship program early on, even if it's just a simulated exercise, right? Where they're not necessarily going to go off and like work on their businesses, but even if it's just a simulated exercise where for one weekend they pretend to be like CEOs of their companies and they have to build their companies and make a pitch. That exercise alone, even if it's just for a weekend, is going to force them into thinking, what do I care about? What do I believe? And how can I use the resources that I have to make a difference?
Oh, okay, great. Sounds good. I'll just send you an email after so
Cool.
we can, meet.
Yeah, and I think also for youth without disabilities, learning about entrepreneurship would be life changing. So we talked a little bit about entrepreneurship, a little bit about disability. Let's talk a little bit about advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you are starting out and you want to figure out how might you advocate for your rights, and it can be, let's say, at your school or at your workplace or even in local government. What's the first step?
Good questions. First step is you gotta know your rights. You have to know your rights. And this is something that I actually learned from Judy, from the woman that I was talking to about. So many people, disabled people included, don't know their rights. You, there's this thing called the individualized employment plan, which a lot of disabled people have while they're in school, or or when they're transitioning from school to college, um, which is a plan that talks about the services they need and what type of support they need. And so many people might not know what their plans are, or they might not know what the policies for creating the plan are. They don't know, and this happened to me too. Like, I was working with a counselor, and the counselor told me, this was years ago, but I was working with a counselor, and the counselor told me, um, we don't fund um, we don't fund summer school. And the first thing I said was, oh, he told me they don't fund summer school. I'm just gonna take what he told me, right? And then the future came, and I met Judy, and she started kind of training me on that. And then when I asked again years later, I asked that I wanted to go to summer school, and he said, we don't fund summer school. And I said, oh, really? Can you show me the policy that says that you don't fund summer school? And he wasn't able to show me the policy because there wasn't a policy that said that they didn't fund summer school. And so they ended up funding me for summer school. That's at the individual level. So really understanding what your rights are, and not taking no for an answer without asking, what are the policies? Why are you telling me no? What's the logic behind this? Because oftentimes knowing your rights can be your greatest weapon, right? Because you can ask the right questions.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I wish we had time to talk a little bit more about what are your rights, right? At least in DC. But I think we do. Maybe we can talk about it for just a little bit.
Yeah, in DC primarily, most agencies use, and I think DC government has sort of instituted this policy. This policy it's called person-centered approach, which means the person is the ultimate decider of the services that you receive, and should be telling the agencies what they need, rather than the agencies telling the individual what the agencies think they need, right? So it's a little bit of I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's all the services that should be driven by what the individual needs, as opposed to being driven by what the agencies think the individual needs. And so what's really good about that approach, and I'm really happy that DC particularly implements that approach, is that if you're not happy with your services, you can request um, a change of services. There's this organization called Protection and Advocacy, which is specifically for disabled people. In DC, the Protection and Advocacy Agency is handled by an organization called University Legal Services. So if a provider, a service provider, is not providing the services that you need, you can reach out to the Protection and Advocacy. These are legal lawyers, and they can tell you if you have a case, if you don't have a case, what recourse can you take to make sure that the agencies are giving you what you need.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Diego, for taking the time to be here with us today. I truly, truly appreciate you. Are there any final thoughts you have?
Of course. Happy to be here. And yeah, feel free to, I put my email in the chat, so feel free to reach out. And
Awesome.
Happy to be a resource for folks.
Awesome. So just real quick, I want to tell you a little bit about why we're doing this. So we started a digital series to cover topics that we believe are crucial to entrepreneurs and to have important discussions such as this one. These are donation-based workshops, and all of the money we gather goes to entrepreneurs who don't qualify for federal and local aid, with the exception of the money gathered in this workshop. That's going to go to Diego's organization, who is doing amazing work with entrepreneurship and with the disability community. So thank you to everyone who donated. Thank you to everyone for being here, and spread the word about what you learned today. And keep in mind, we have more workshops coming up on publicity, marketing, sales, operations, you name it. If you're an entrepreneur and you're just getting started, I highly recommend you attend. And bye. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.